All right, we are back with another edition of the Osceola's FSU Spring Practice Preview. Today, we're going to talk about a position group that may have some of the most hotly contested battles on the football field this spring, and obviously that is the offensive line. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm the host of Seminole Sidelines, and I am joined today by former FSU offensive lineman and former college football coach Mark Salva, and of course Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein. Listen, Mark, we love all these things, but as two former college offensive linemen, this is kind of what we live for, right? And this is a exciting spring for Florida State in its totality. I cannot remember since covering FSU since 2019, a team that looks deeper, more athletic, and more physically mature than this one. And particularly the offensive line, for the first time in years, looks to be a known strength going into football season. There were questions last year about this offensive line. Obviously had a great year running the ball. And of course, so a lot to talk about. There were some key losses. Dylan Gibbons is gone. Jazz Turnentime's gone. But certainly some key additions that we're going to talk about in Casey Roddick, Keandre Jones, and Jeremiah Byers. But guys, just overall, and we'll go position by position as we get into it. But what do you like? What are the positives about this group? What do you like about this group heading into the spring, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, this is as good a shape as this group has been in a number of years. I know I'm stating the obvious, right? And just go back to where we were this time last year. I mean, I know for me, my ask of this group going into the spring and going into the fall last year was I just want them to play hard. I want them to play with some intensity. I want them to play with a little pride, attitude and effort. And, obviously they did that and really exceeded all expectations. And so now coming into this year, the ask is a little bit more. Obviously the expectations are higher based on the production that the offense had last year. Obviously a lot of success in the running game. And of course, the offensive line always gets credit for that and they always get the blame, which rightfully so. And so by virtue of that, there's some high expectations. I think this group, was greatly improved, obviously. I think there are areas that as a collective, they need to improve drastically. And I think one of those is obviously short yardage defense and offense and goal line offense, right? How many times have we struggled to get, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, running the ball, just not physically able to move people off the ball. So, that's for me, that's a big area of needed improvement. And I hope that that's a big part of the agenda for the spring for this group. So how do you correct that? Well, the good news is we got a lot of guys coming back, right? And we only lose 2. So that's also, that some people would say that's good and that's bad. I think it's good. The other part is we brought guys in that could probably help rectify some of that. And, so yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The other thing that gets me really excited about this group is that the numbers of quality, right? We held our breath. Every time Robert Scott went down, we all collectively hold our breath and wring our hands. That's because the difference between Robert Scott and the guy behind him was always tremendous, right? And that was, with this group, there may be as many as 8 to 10 that where the difference is not so great to where if a guy gets hurt, the whole offense is not handcuffed because of one offensive lineman going down. Whereas in the last 2 years, that's kind of been the case, kind of similar to this discussion we had with the defensive line. So having that kind of depth in competition in spring practice to me is really exciting because that's just going to elevate everybody's play and collectively as a group should see some improvement.
Yeah. Fish, you've covered this team for a long time, just from a recruiting standpoint. You and I both believe, and Mark does too, that it's a numbers game on the offensive line. Currently, by my count, 17 scholarship offensive linemen. Just what's your overall thought before we get into position by position breakdown? What's your overall thought of this group? Obviously, they've they've hit the portal and the high school recruiting trail to strengthen this position group. But just your overall thoughts before we break it down, starting with the tackles.
Yeah, number one is experience. It's so big with the offensive line, guys getting a lot of reps, getting a lot of playing time during games. And even the backups last year, towards the end of the year, they started blowing teams out. So a lot of those younger guys like Armella and some of the other guys that were, freshmen last year were able to get some good playing time in. And that helps going into this spring. A lot of that stuff could be broken down, what they did right and wrong and corrected. And now you go into this next year with, like Mark said, you're not going in with just 6 guys or 7 guys and hoping 1 or 2 guys don't go down because the whole line struggles. But they've done a very good job bringing in numbers. I've always said the one thing that's killed FSU on the O-line the past 20 years is they would bring in 6 guys one year and then 1 the next and then 0. And their whole roster management of the O-line was just terrible. They would just 2 or 3 guys from that 6-man class wouldn't work out. And now it just stretches along the whole offensive line. They've done a very good job with Norvell and Coach Atkins of constantly bringing in. Somebody asked on one of the message boards again, how many guys do I think they're going to bring in again this year? I think it's going to constantly be 4 to 5 every year. They know how important that O-line is. You can't win without winning the trenches. It doesn't matter all the skilled guys you have. They're not the fancy guys in recruiting that everybody wants to land. But until you don't have them, people don't realize how important they are. And that O-line has improved greatly. And like I said, it's not even the frontline guys, the depth. And when you go look at the guys they brought in the portal, these kids look physically different too. That's big. I think getting bigger up front, especially after you watch the Florida and the Oklahoma game, I think it's very important that they get some bigger, wider, thicker body kids up on that O-line. And I think they've done that. They've accomplished their goals. And I think this will definitely be one of the top offensive lines in the ACC this year.
Yeah, listen, I think, like we said, there's going to be a ton of position battles. You got a lot of guys that are going to compete for reps at running back, wide receiver, tight end, defensive line, and defensive end, and obviously the secondary. Linebacker seems to be a little bit more set, obviously. Quarterback is. But, listen, I want to ask this, Mark, to you as a coach, a former coach. The guys that have been the starters the last several years, probably last 7 or 8 years, have definitively been the starters, right? There's not been a whole lot of competition outside of somebody getting injured, having to go in a game, as you already alluded to. But how, as a coach, do you get across to the players, especially these veteran returning starters, that the reps in this spring practice are probably the most valuable reps of any spring practice they've been through because of the depth?
Well, I think you state your intent, obviously going into the spring, and I've heard Alex Atkins state several times that practice is a competition that you have to perform every day, and just put some meaning behind your words. I remember, during tour duty, mat drills for us, and spring practice, we used to have that whiteboard with the magnetic tags that had everybody's name, and then stacked by position, and have a depth chart. And after every practice, after every tour duty, we'd go in there and we'd just point to a guy and say, did he perform today? Did he, where is he? Did the guy behind him, did he overtake him? And start moving tags around and then putting people in the right places, right? Putting the right pegs in the right places. And so having that accountability every day in practice, in showing, say you come in the meeting the next day and say, hey, you're running second team right tackle today, you're going to first team left tackle, whatever. And just so that the guys know that, this is a merit-based system here. It's not because I like you or don't like you. It's based on performance. And that you going in with that understanding is critical.
Right now, I have this question for both of you, and listen. There's a ton of key position battles all over the place, especially on the offensive line. Because of that, listen, we've seen coaches in today's modern football do a lot of rep management, contact management, those type of things. But there's more competition on this team across the board than there has been in a long time. Do you think Mike and his staff will be more aggressive with the practice plan? And by that, I mean more 11-on-11 contact work, more inside drill, more I mean, you're probably not going to do any more pass pro than you would otherwise. But do you anticipate, because of the competition and the need to establish who your frontline players, you think we'll see more contact work maybe than we have in the past?
You asked me that yesterday. I've been thinking about that question because on one hand, I understand that, practice is different now and the concerns are different than they were, say, 10, 15 years ago in terms of, managing injuries and what the NCAA allows in terms of contact and all that stuff. And so we're in a little bit of a different era in that. So do you manage it more aggressively? I don't know what you're able to. And I don't know if they feel like they can accomplish what they can get accomplished without full contact. Now, the coach part of me, in my experience, tells me that the only way to get good at playing football is playing football. You can only hit bags and dummies and guys holding bags and the guys holding balls and running around hoops and all that stuff. You can only that only goes so far, right? That helps build certain specific skills, but to learn how to play football and get a feel, the only way to do is play football. So the more that you can do, I think the better you are. The more you can go good on good, the more that Jeremiah Byers can go against Jared Verse, the better off you are. And you just got to be cognizant of the fact that we might be in period 23 and it's 95 degrees, 100% humidity. Guys are starting to get a little sloppy, and just have shorter whistles or something, right? So it's an interesting balance that you have to have, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to lose somebody for a year, but you can't go in scared either. You got to go in and learn to play football, and that's always kind of been the way that that we always did it, right?
Yeah,
back in the day. So,
Fish, do you expect that there will be a more physical spring than maybe we've seen in the past, and not just during Mike's tenure, but just in general? Well, the spring's usually where you get more of your heavy contact work in anyway, but do you think we'll see more than what we've seen in the past because of the numbers?
Yeah, I think Mark said it best. I just think they've changed. You've seen it at the pro level, the high school level, the college level. There's like a lot less contact in these practices. I think they'll do some more stuff with O-line and D-line. I don't know about all units, but I definitely think up front, because they do have a little more depth. Usually when you go into spring ball, you only have 8 to 10 healthy bodies. They got a lot of guys on that O-line. So they need to get these guys reps. So they need to hit each other. I think it could get a little physical, and you could see some fights and stuff. And that's a good thing. And Mark will tell you the same thing. You want these guys smacking each other around a little bit,
Oh, I agree. Spring's always a good time for a couple of fights.
Yeah.
Get close when you get in the fall camp, but you can kind of be a little bit of enemies during the spring.
Yeah.
Listen, in football's you need a fight or two.
Yeah.
You need to find out who's got a little something in their neck. And
it's usually the younger guys that get in fights, right?
well, my bet's going to be Thomas Schrader to start the first fight, because he does have a little bit. He does have a little bit of that in his neck. But Mark, you mentioned it. And I want to get. I mean, I think we all in agreement here. I think we're going to find out pretty early. We do in fact think that some of these battles will last through fall camp, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But you mentioned earlier the guys on the defensive line: Jared Verse, Gilbert Edmonds, Fabian Lovett, Darrell Jackson. You name it. They've got a very deep. Dennis Briggs. I mean, we've talked about the defensive line and how deep they are, particularly inside. Josh Farmer, we haven't even mentioned him.
Darrell Jackson,
yeah. So, that they're not only is it's going to be an internal competition within that unit, but they're obviously the competition they're going to face on the defensive line. Is that an advantage for Florida State and Alex Atkins during the spring? Does it help him and he and Mike Norvell find out quicker who the top line guys are going to be and kind of round that too deep into shape?
In terms of the level of competition going against a deep D line too, I think so. I mean, look, you'd rather have more bodies than not enough, right? And so the rest can be, really good and snappy. They have a unique situation where they maybe can go in some situations 2 huddles, right? And go good on good and rapid fire reps, where they can even get more reps, where you're not having to, plug and play a bunch of guys and a bunch of guys standing around. So how they manage that depth, they have some options, and it could be real interesting. I think with that much depth on both sides of the ball, you have ways to where you can even do more reps than if guys are just one deep and standing around, honestly, and still have quality practices.
Fish, what are your thoughts on just the level of competition and how it's going to affect how this offensive line comes together and how quickly it comes together?
Well, it only could help. Competition breeds, guys to get better. That's the one thing you've always heard about Florida State is going way back 20 years. It's not that it's the starters that are good. It's the backups are able to come in and produce at the same level. And a lot of that's that competition through the spring. These guys constantly competing good on good, guys you only get better when you go against somebody really good. And I think they've brought in a lot of moving parts, a lot of guys that are a lot more talented than they had. And it's only can help both sides of the football. I think the O-line is really going to improve because that D-line is deeper, more talented. And you know what? When it's human nature. If you go against somebody really good and they bring in a second stringer and he's not as good, you're going to let up. But if that second guy's just as good, that O-lineman has to have this mentality that, hey, I got to go hard every rep, no matter what, whether it's the first rep or the 50th rep in practice. I got to keep coming hard. And I think that's where you're going to see that improvement because of that depth.
Yeah. And, in the spring, it's usually, ones versus ones, twos versus twos, whereas in the fall, it's usually the opposite. It's usually, ones versus twos and twos versus ones in terms of where you're going against. So, there's when you're demoting and promoting within the scheme of, within the spring like that, you're still, if a guy goes down, from first to second team, he's still going against some pretty good dudes,
Yeah.
So that helps too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, it's going to be fascinating. And Mark, you and I talked about this off the record. Fish, we haven't had a chance to talk. In football staff rooms, they have the magnetic stickers that you place on the board, and you got the first team listed, then the second team behind them. And as I've worked this depth chart mentally through my mind, there's a lot of if then scenarios, right? And we're fixing to get into that because if so and so starts here, then so and so may move there. And as you and I, there's countless combinations. So let's kind of get into it. As I said, you've got 5 guys returning that started at least one game last year for Florida State. Robert Scott at offensive tackle, Bless Harris at offensive tackle, Demetri Emanuel, if he comes back, we're going to get into that. He's got to get a eligibility waiver. Darius Washington and Maurice Smith. And then you add Casey Roddick, who started 30-something games at Colorado, Keandre Jones, who started 20-something games at Auburn, and then Jeremiah Byers, who started 30-something games at UTEP. So this is a veteran group that's been fortified by the portal. And so you've not only got more experienced guys coming in, you've got some leadership. We'll get into that with Casey Roddick. He was a team captain at Colorado last year. Jeremiah Byers was all conference at UTEP last year. But let's start with the tackles and the centers because I really think those two position battles could shape the battles at guard. So let's start with the tackles, guys. And as you see at the screen, we do not have them in depth chart order, but you've got Robert Scott, Bless Harris, Jeremiah Byers, Julian Armella, Jalen Early could be tackle guard. Daughtry Richards is going to be a tackle, and obviously Lucas Simmons, the true freshman who's enrolled early, is here and was very impressive yesterday in tour of duties. By the way, he was not in over his skis. There's no doubt about that. But Mark, just get your thoughts on that group, knowing that some of these guys may work at other positions. But how do you feel about the tackle positions moving, going into spring?
I mean, this is about as good a shape as you can be in. You've got veteran talent, older guys, and you've got some really talented young guys who may even be more talented, right? And as they grow and learn and can even push those guys. Robert Scott brings you a lot of experience, a lot of snaps as a Seminole. Just remember watching him as a true freshman, trying to figure it out and how much, he's grown since then. Bless Harris was the starter going into last year. The Duquesne game and got hurt. So he's almost like a brand new player because we didn't have the benefit of his services, after that first game. And then Byers comes in and looks and talks and feels like he's the real deal and couldn't be possibly an upgrade. And then you got those young guys with Armella early. I mean, in Richardson, who, I mean, Armella, it was obviously very highly recruited and highly thought of, and it looked like his development was spot on, and played some snaps last year. So what you have here is you've got, I think, between Scott, Harris, and Byers, you've got three to start. You got three for two positions, right? You've got three guys, and you've got two positions as to going into the spring. And what do you do with the guy who's not the starter? You move him to another position, because the goal of spring is to put everybody in the right places and find your five best. That's the goal coming out of the spring. Number one is get everybody in the right spot. Number two, and then I know there's a lot of cross training and whatnot, and that can change weekly. But you want to, in your mind as a coach, you want to say, okay, this is my best five, and put them in the right spot. So out of these three, are these three guys three of the five best offensive linemen we have? They may be. And if that's the case, then where else can we, insert that talent to make us the best we can?
Yeah. Fish, your thoughts on the list that we have at offensive tackle?
Yeah, I'm very excited about Byers, just from what I've heard from outsiders that know the kid and what he did at UTEP. And also, just you look at him, his film was about as good as we've seen at the tackle spot. Very athletic. He could bend. He could do the things that you want tackles to do. The tackle position has kind of been a question mark the last couple of years. And Byers coming in, I think, solidifies one spot. Robert Scott is where we want him to be at this point of his maturation process. He's a guy that you didn't want him to really play early, had to play early. Now he's physically gotten bigger, stronger, and he has all the tools. I think with those two, you got two guys that are going to be starters most likely. Bless Harris was doing pretty well before he got hurt. And Armella, by the end of last year, I thought really showed some things. I thought he played well in the Miami game at the end of that game. So those four guys are your tackles. You can rotate them in and out. Some of the other guys like Early, I've heard really good reports on him. And Richardson and Lucas Simmons, the talents there, they're more, another year away probably from really producing on the football field. But this is a very deep and talented rotation that you can bring in. Like Simmons and Richardson, that worst case scenario, if they had to slide in a game, that you feel like they could hold their own, that they're not going to be overwhelmed and just be a body out there. So they've got all different types of body types too. Jeremiah Byers, a little longer guy. Same with Simmons. That's what you got to like. I like where they're sitting at the tackle spot. This is about as good a spot they've been in probably over a decade. So.
Yeah, and Byers was very impressive yesterday in tour duties. The first time we've had a look at him in action. Moves extremely well. Bless looked like he was moving around pretty good. Now, listen, and I'll ask you guys, but I think the two guys that can make the move inside more so maybe than the other. And listen, Armella the light may come on for Armella and Early, and they may be more in the thick of this thing than we think. They're certainly going to be in a battle for the two deep. There's no doubt about that. They may end up starting for competing for a starting job. But I think out of the three guys, the three veterans, Scott, Harris, and Byers, I think the two that could make the more natural move to inside are Scott and Byers. They're bigger, thicker than Harris. If it turned out to be Harris Scott or Harris Byers, do you take one of those other guys? Do you think Florida State would potentially look at moving one of those other guys into guard?
Well, I think it depends on what happens with those other positions and who's competing. Again, who are your five best? And am I weakening a position by taking a guy like Robert Scott and putting him at guard? Am I weakening one position to make another one stronger? And am I really stronger there? Right. So, I mean, look, let's just say Armella really shows out this spring and he's in the mix and he's a co-starter. He's one of those older guys. Now what do you do? I mean, some of our best players on the offensive line might be right here in this group, right? And if that, are they hard and true tackles, or can they cross train and play other positions? And a lot of it depends on what you're going to get at these other positions. Again, who are our five best? If Julian Armella is one of our five best, then he needs to be in the game, right?
Yep.
If Bless Harris is one of our five best, then he needs to be in the game. Bottom line.
Fish, what are your thoughts on that?
I just think, listen, it's a long season. A lot of these guys are going to get a lot of reps.
Yep.
You want to rotate these guys in, keep them fresh as the season goes along, especially in the games that you're playing teams that are inferior to you. This is a great opportunity for them to continue to build this depth. And like I said, it's a long season. They have championship aspirations. The teams that get the furthest and make a run at those playoffs or conference championships are the ones that are the deepest, because you know how it is. Guys are going to have high ankle sprains. They're going to have, soft tissue. Offensive linemen, D linemen get banged up. And the more fresh you can keep these guys, the better it is for the overall talent on the team. I think they'll be fine on the offensive line. And a lot of these guys, they want to have 8 to 10 bodies that they can really just move in and out at different positions. You know how it is. They're going to move some of these. It's automatic that they're going to move. You'll see some of these guys moving inside and cross training, because you don't know when a guy's going to go down. And sometimes that guy at that guard spot, that second guy may not be as strong as that second guy at tackle. And if you feel like you can move him inside and not lose anything, you're going to bring him in and let him play.
Yeah, I agree with both of you said on that. Listen, I think it's going to be fascinating. And the other position, listen, they're all five going to be intriguing battles, but you've got another incumbent at center, Maurice Smith, who is going to have to try to hold off Casey Roddick, who has played a tremendous amount of football at Colorado and obviously has some leadership ability, was a captain last year for that football team. And listen, I don't know if you guys, he's a very impressive kid. I don't know if you saw his introductory interview that he had with the local media, but very impressive. And I think this is another battle that could add some flexibility to Florida State's offensive line, because I think Maurice or Casey could possibly move out to a guard position. And then obviously Quayshawn Sapp is another redshirt freshman who we've been particularly impressed by at times. He flashed and looks like he's in better shape than he was last year. He looks leaner, thicker, looks like he's ready to roll. And then, of course, and we'll get to the guards later, but you got Thomas Schrader, Darius Washington, and Bryson Estes, who all have spent time at center. So, Mark, you played center. I played center. It's unusual because of the portal that you would find Maurice Smith going into his fourth year, and he started 2 of those years trying to hold on to his job. And there's a lot of expectations for Casey Roddick. Just talk a little bit about that battle and how that could play out and how it. I
mean, what a weird world we're in, right? To have a 4th year starting center and say you're fighting for your job because of the transfer. Again, it's, Maurice is, I'm a Maurice Smith fan now. I love the way he plays. I love the skill set that he has to play the position. And, but I tend to those kind of centers. I like those kind of guys that are athletic, long, can move, really smart. Who doesn't, right? And he's been pretty productive. Now, if Casey comes in and challenges for the job and he's the best guy, what does he have to do to overtake Maurice Smith, right? Is he a more physical guy? Can he, one thing Maurice did struggle with is just absolutely just moving people one-on-one. Well, at least bigger 330, 40-pound nose guards, right? And of course that's why they're there. So if Casey has the ability maybe to give you that and not lose anything, else, then yeah, I'd say, that's definitely a challenge. Can Casey do the things that Maurice can do? You may have a case where one guy, they're just different skill sets, and you might lose something by playing one, you might gain something by playing the other, and you just got to, figure out what's best for the team moving forward and what you want to do offensively. So what we want to do is we want to run a lot of counters. We'll run the zone occasionally and whatnot, but we like to, pin and pull, and centers block back, and even centers pull. So that tends to be a more athletic guy that can move, rather than having to, root a guy out on his own play when he's 340 pounds. So it just, that kind of just depends, what can happen there.
Fish, what are your thoughts on the position battle at center?
I mean, they keep bringing in guys to beat out Maurice, and he keeps winning the job. I think that just shows you something. from his mindset that I don't think the kid cares. I had heard somebody tell me once about Maurice that he didn't care who they brought in. He felt like he beat them out. A lot of Maurice's issues have been getting bigger and stronger. Early on, he had a lot of like injuries with the shoulders and everything because he was trying to put on the weight. And freshmen shouldn't have to play. He had to play early on. He has a lot of experience now. I think having a Casey Roddick where you don't have to play him as many snaps is only going to enhance Maurice. I think Maurice will win the job once again just because I think the mentality of what he brings. He's a more athletic kid. Maybe he gets overpowered in certain situations, but when they run their zone plays, I think he could do a little more than Casey. I think overall they're in the best spot. They can keep these guys fresh. Once again, having the competition, having the depth, having multiple guys be able to take snaps. I mean, a lot of these guys are going to get cross-trained because they need guys to be able to make those snaps, from the center to shotgun. So a lot of these guys will get to see what a lot of these guys can do. But before it was like if Maurice went down, it's like it was another position where it's like the whole offensive line struggled. Now, if he goes down, they got guys that could come in and you're confident that they're just as good and that the drop-off isn't that great. That's the biggest issue they've had, especially inside at certain positions. They've been good with the frontline guys, but when Maurice went down, they just were like, oh man, who comes in? And sometimes it was disastrous. So overall, I like where they're at. I think once again, like I said, this is only going to make Maurice better. And he's probably gotten even bigger and stronger this offseason. Just another year. He doesn't have those same injuries coming into this spring that he's had in years past. So overall, I think this is going to be a great competition between the two of them.
Yeah, and if you're right, and Maurice Smith were to win the job, I could see Casey Roddick sliding out to one of the guard, battling for one of the starting guard positions, and then obviously if you needed a second team center, you could slide Casey back in. So yeah, listen, it's a great problem to have. You've got, where this offensive line has gone from where it was just 2 years ago. I mean, even last year's, we alluded to, you really didn't know who was going to be we didn't know Bless Harris was going to win the starting job last year. There were still questions about who your best five were and if you had any depth. Now, you're going to find your best five fairly quickly, I think, because of who they're going against on defense. And then obviously you've got some really quality depth depending on how this all shakes out. You'll have quality depth no matter what. Like I said, you got 8 guys who have starting experience at the major college football level. So it's going to be fascinating. Again, I'm as excited to see that as I am the tackles. And then, of course, where there probably are some questions is where we move to guard. And, again, this is our projected guard, the guys we think will start the spring at guard. And, all right, Dimitri Emmanuel, there's a question there because he's got to get an eligibility waiver approved. We don't know where that he is in that status. So he's listed on the roster. So my anticipation is that he will be back, but who knows? NCAA works in strange ways. Darius Washington, who's kind of the utility guy, he has started games at tackle, guard, and has played center. I don't know if he started a game at center, but he's certainly played all 3 positions. Thomas Schrader has struggled with injuries, but what we liked about him and what we do like about him is he's a physical kid. He's a hard-nosed kid. Kind of has that same mentality that Dylan Givens has. Then you got a guy, Mark, that you're a big fan of coming out of high school, Kania Charlton. You would have loved the way he looked in tour of duty. He is leaner than he ever has been. Still a big kid, but a guy that moves really well for his size, and he's got great feet. And then you've got Keandre Jones, who started 22 games at Auburn, started 13 games in 2021 for him. Was the only guy on Auburn's offensive line to start 13 games that year. Only started 2 games last year, but against 2 pretty good teams, Penn State and Alabama. So you kind of get an idea of watching his film, what kind of player he is. And then you've got Bryson Estes, who at times has flashed and we really thought might play a little bit more than he did this past season. And then you got Zane Herring, who entered his redshirt junior year. Just your overall thoughts, Mark, on that group.
Well, yeah, getting Emmanuel back, I think, would be huge for the depth of this line, whether he's the starter or not, because, he started 12 games for us last year, or 13, I guess, right? And he at times was a very physical presence. He brought a pretty hard-nosed attitude. I like the way he plays. I really do. I like the way he gets after guys, blocking to the whistle, great effort blocker. Maybe a little limited, athletically in terms of his change of direction and whatnot in pass pro, but really like him. Darius, we've been trying to, same thing with like Maurice. We've been trying to get rid of Darius for years now, but he just keeps popping up. Imagine where we would be without Darius Washington, being able to play all those positions. Like you said, he started the game at every tackling guard and played some significant snaps at center. So he's like a putty man. He's dependable. He may not be the best at any one position, but he is a good college football player and kind of a utility knife security blanket for an offensive line coach if you're in a spot, right? And with the amount of snaps that he has. And then you got, Keandre Jones. I'm thinking, okay, here's a big mover of mass, right? He's a big dude, not athletic as some of the other guys, but he's a massive dude who when we're playing those even fronts and we're playing those 320-pound defensive tackles and 340-pound nose guards, you want to move mass to mass, kind of a Dylan Gibbons type. That's what we loved about Dylan. He was a mauler, right? And I think that's what Coach Atkins likes at guard. He wants physical guys who are maulers, to pull in and trap those end guys on the line of scrimmage, or just take them on in the zone scheme when you got those even fronts. So there's a lot of pieces to play with, and I think just overall that's why it's so important. I think early that they get guys in the right spots so they can evaluate properly and give guys chances to learn these positions. And then if they need to say, what, this guy's better here, he's better than him, let's move it, then move him around. But just a lot of options for Alex Atkins this spring, and it's just I can't wait to see how he does this and what we come out with at the other side.
Fish, what about you? What are your thoughts on the personnel at guard, knowing that obviously some of this may be impacted by what happens at the other two spots? The two tackle spots.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the list of the guys you put up, I think it's be huge to really get Dimitri back. Just all the snaps he took last year, and he was a very solid lineman. Because then you're down to really, if he's not in the picture, you have Darius Washington and Jones who have reps, but everybody else in that group really haven't played a whole lot. So you don't want to have a lack of experience. Having a 3-man rotation, and you could always slip one of those tackles inside a guard, like you said before, then that position becomes more comfortable. I want to have at least a 2 deep of guys that have played before. I know Charlton and Estes and Herring and Schrader, these guys are guys we've heard about for a few years now that have the potential, but until they do it, you'd like to have guys that have a little more experience, and that's what Jones has, that's what Emmanuel has, that's what Washington has. So if you could get those 3, that's a good first 3 rotation of 2 guys, and you could slide one else in when you need them. But Emmanuel coming back would be huge for the overall group, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the way he played last year. Obviously, you got a guy that plays extremely hard, plays above his size, above his but his capabilities. Really, I mean, he was a guy that was a big part of FSU's success in the run game. Mark, and I may have asked you this question in a roundabout way early when we started this thing, but you're a former offensive line coach. Now, we've never had offensive lines this team in South Carolina, at least we don't think. No. But as a former offensive line coach at a SEC program, how does Alex Atkins go about making sure that he gets enough reps for all these guys to make proper evaluations?
Well, you only have so much time in a day and so many periods in practice. I mean, it's going to be impossible to really do that in terms of, everybody get equal number of reps. You got to move, you got to keep practice moving. So you film everything is what you do is you tape every drill and you go back and you watch it and you watch every little thing. Again, every practice is a competition, right? And, I'm looking for things that separate guys. I'm looking for nuance in what I think you bring to the table. Surprise me, show me something every time you take a rep in a drill. And so it's incumbent upon the guys to really separate themselves. And, sometimes it goes beyond just winning a drill or executing a drill well. Sometimes it's, it's leadership. Sometimes it's, just maybe cohesion and these guys work well together, like it may be that, when you put Byers and say you put Byers and Robert Scott on the left side, they just work really well together and they have an unspoken natural communication. So that's what we're going to go with. So there's lots of things that could happen, but you just got to throw guys in the fire. And look, I go back to the most important times are going to be those scrimmage situations. When this team has those, scrimmages where they're playing football down in just a situation or whatever in the stadium, and there's not a coach behind them giving them immediate feedback after every rep when they're out there and having to play the game the way, as opposed to being broken down in a drill or just a real short whistles or whatnot. And those are going to be the critical times to really evaluate, because that's going to tell you the most about each player.
Well, let me ask you another question. Go ahead, Fish.
No, I'm good.
Okay. I was going to Mark, are you, you mentioned who works together, chemistry, all that. Are you trying to establish chemistry in the spring? Are you just trying? Are you as I mean, obviously, I don't think you're as worried about it in the spring as you are the fall. But how important is continuity, chemistry being established in the spring?
It's down the list. It's down the list. It's the goal of spring is get guys in the right spots and find out who your best are. That's the goal in spring. And in that process, every individual player is growing their skill set, improving, getting better, learning the scheme, right? That's a key too. So, but continuity at this point is not critical. You got all fall camp to work on that.
Yeah. I agree. But obviously, with you having experience going through this, thought our listeners would like to hear what you had to say about that. All right, a couple of final questions. Roster management has become more important than ever. And probably a part of that is rep management. There is another NCAA transfer portal opening. Mark, it's a challenge where you got big numbers, right? How it's almost turned into a chess game. We realistically think that a lot of these battles will rage into fall camp because there's going to be 28 more practices before you play LSU in August, late August. It's kind of a chess game. I'm not saying that it's a little bit political is not the right word, but there's also you got to kind of keep the guys motivated to continue. I mean, and want to stay for the fall, right? If they're not, right. If they don't feel like they're, today's kids seem to want to hit the portal as soon as they don't think. And I'm not talking about anyone individually on Florida State's roster. I'm talking about what we see with the NCAA transfer portal every time it opens. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of kids entering. As a coach, and this did not exist when you coached. If you transferred, you had to sit a year. Now these guys can, talk to somebody that they was recruited by. And anyway, so how do you handle having to worry? And I'm not saying that Mike Norvell or Alex Atkins are overly concerned about it, but it is a reality of college football now when you virtually have a free agency period. So talk about how you handle that.
Dude, you're asking the wrong guy. I have no idea. That was never, ever a consideration when I coached. And, because, you like to stack talent. I love the way they have them stacked. They've got older veterans that, are in their third and fourth year who have a lot of experience. And you got a level where you have some younger guys that are in like their second and third year. And then you've got your freshmen, redshirt and otherwise, who are in there, and they're all in different stages of development. And that's the way you like to have them stacked. We have it just the way we want it. We're going to have our older guys. They're going to be the guys we depend on. We'll get these the second tier guys, get them some more reps and get them, greased up. So then when these other guys leave, they just step right in, and you've got experience, and you just keep that wheel turning. But that's not the reality of college football these days at most positions. So offensive line, well, obviously we've taken advantage of it. We've gotten some guys come in for different reasons, and a lot of it is to further their career and their profile in a bigger program. But, golly, I don't think you can go in. It's like injuries, right? If you go and worry about injuries, it's just going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think you just go and do what you have to do, and if a guy wants to leave, and if that's the way it is, then he probably didn't belong anyways, and you can't go in worrying about that.
Yeah. Fish, you talk to a lot of college coaches that are having to deal with this on a regular basis. What's your thoughts on rep management, rep distribution, roster management as it pertains to having to go through another NCAA transfer portal and not wanting to lose a guy that you think is going to develop into a good player, but maybe doesn't have the patience to wait his turn?
Yeah, I just think it's part of the deal now. I mean, I don't think there's anything you could do about it. There's going to be guys on this roster that come right after spring practice and they put the depth charts out heading into fall that they're going to go, you know what, I could go somewhere else and start. I want to start over. It's part of the process. Florida State's benefited from the portal, but there's going to be times where it's going to hurt them. They've got 17 guys. I would think that if the portal does open back up and they do lose one or two guys, that they'll go get two more guys. They've done a very good job of finding guys to come in and replace those guys that have left. And that's just part of the process. It's the frustrating part of this whole thing is that you build these guys up, you develop them, you think they're ready to go. And then right while they're ready to go, the kid decides or somebody gets in his ear, hey, listen, you could go start somewhere else. You're just going to be a backup and it's going to happen. There's going to be guys that are going to leave. So it's just part of the deal.
All right. Well, listen, guys, we have now talked about every position group on Florida State's offense. I kind of want to tie it all together now. This is a very good offense last year. You had some additions that listen, you're going to get Winston Wright back, who really is a newcomer at this point after missing all of last year. You add Jaheim Bell, you add Kyle Murlock. You watch Deuce Spann in tour of duty, phenomenal athlete. Ja'Kai Douglas was very impressive. You got Trey Benson. You've got Rodney Hill. You've got Lawrence Toafili. Of course, you bring Jordan Travis back. You bring in a 5-star wide receiver. What do you want to see in totality out of this offense? What are your expectations for this offense? And I guess how much better could this offense be than it was last year?
Great question. If you're an offensive coordinator, and this is within the context of the system that we run, and we're not an air raid offense. Mike likes to use and create matchup problems by substituting personnel in playing guys like Jaheim Bell or Ja'Kai Douglas who can play multiple positions and not know what kind of formation you're going to get into, right? So the options are so many. It's almost an embarrassment of riches when you look at the skill positions and the guys that can play different positions, to where a defense coordinator has no idea what you're going to do. You can line up in 2 tights, 1 back. You can line up and have that same personnel and line up in what it looks like 4 wides and no backs, 5 wides. So you can run the gamut. So it's just the only limit is the imagination of Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins. The other thing is that you have a quarterback who has mastered this system, who can really execute and run the offense as intended, or if things break down, he can create plays with his legs, either escaping and throwing down the field or running and scoring touchdowns. Demonstrated it multiple times all through his career and being smart there. And then the thing I probably like best about this offense is that it's dedicated to running the football, right? I think in Mike's world, he wants to be 50-50. The fact that we had, was it 7 200-yard rushing games in a row, excites me, because that means we're dedicated to running the football regardless of what the situation is. And, that just opens up so much and it makes it fun for the big guys for sure. So do I have high expectations? I sure do, for good reason, because there's improvement everywhere along every offensive position. There has been improvement. There's been depth added, and the key players are all returning, and that's exciting.
Fish, what about you? What are your thoughts on the offense as a whole? How excited are you to see how they utilize this wealth of talent at the skill positions? And by the way, for those of you that don't know, there's probably no position that requires more skill technically than offensive line. So they're
That's all they work on.
Yeah. So, but Fish, what are your expectations with who they've added? And Mark and I and you and I talked about it. The things that you can do formationally out of what's typically an 11 personnel grouping or 12 personnel grouping. There's so many. You can really throw defensive coordinators off with what they're going to be able to do formationally with what would be traditionally a 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 13 personnel grouping, or you could, like you said, Mark, you could see no backs empty, but have 2 running backs in the game, right? Because you can put Toafili in the slot, Jaheim Bell in the slot, Trey Benson in the slot. There's a lot of things you can do with it. So, Fish, what are your expectations on this offense potentially being even better than it was last year?
Yeah, when you go back to the Memphis days of Mike's offense, he ran a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, bringing the 2 tight ends, the 3 tight ends in. I think they could get very creative. I really like the idea of bringing in Winston Wright. He gives them one of the guys. I know Florida State had like most plays over 20, but they had to scheme a lot of that stuff to get guys open. Guys like Jaheim Bell and also Winston Wright give them the ability to stretch the middle of the field and really get behind defenders without just scheming guys open. They can run, Winston can run by defenders. So I'm excited about that side of it. I think Jaheim is the biggest acquisition of the offseason just because of what he can do. He can line up out of the backfield. He can run wildcat. He can run off tackle as a tight end. He can run. You could put him split out wide as a wide receiver. He's the most versatile player they have on their offense. I think he's going to be that Swiss Army knife. He gives them so much. And I think someone like Norvell, who's creative in the play calling, he's going to move this kid around and get those mismatches. And I think you're going to see a big season from Jaheim as long as he stays healthy.
I'm disappointed, Fish, sitting there saying that Jaheim Bell is the acquisition. What about Jeremiah Byers? Come on, man. I thought you were one of us. That's why you're here. You're one of us.
I am one of you guys, man. I look like a lineman now, I used to look like a running back.
So you pick the tight end, and you pick the tight end that looks like a wide receiver and a running back. You don't pick the tight end that looks like a tackle.
Hey, man, I've been pumping up the O-line enough, man. I'm on your side, man. I keep saying how important the O-line and D-lines are, but Jaheim's it's exciting because of what he does. He brings they just really haven't had a player like him since like Nick O'Leary, and I think he's a more athletic kid than O'Leary. So I'm excited of what he can bring to the offense and especially what they're able to do. He's going to be a major mismatch as far as I'm concerned once they get him on that field.
Yeah, listen, I think you would have been impressed with the way Morlock moved yesterday in tour duty. He's a lot more fluid athlete than I thought he was. He runs really well. All right, Mark. So Fish is most excited about Jaheim Bell. Did you give it away with Byers, or who are you most looking forward to seeing this spring?
Yeah, no, it's Byers. I want to see that dude because like I said, where we need to improve as a unit on the offensive line is in that short yardage. Just moving guys off the line of scrimmage. And rooting guys out of there. And I'm hoping that he can be a guy that can help us be more efficient in that way. And you know what? Just, dominate games up front. That's there's nothing more humiliating to a defense than when you jam it down their throat, right? A big play, in the passing game is 2 guys, one guy missing coverage and a guy throwing the ball to another guy. But when you methodically matriculate the ball down the field at 2 or 3 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards at a time, that is humiliating to a defense, and that's what I live for.
Mark going Hank Stram circa 1968.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, listen, I'm going to pick 2. I'm going to pick one of the big guys and one of the small guys, and I'm going to go with Casey Roddick. Probably, a homer because he plays center. And the other thing is, if you watch his interview, when they introduced the new guys, they put him in front of the local media, and he was very impressive. He has a lot of the same qualities that Dylan Gibbons has from a personality, leadership standpoint. So I am looking forward to seeing how that – listen, I'm interested in that center battle anyway, but I can't wait to see what he does. And then, of course, the guy that I picked, and, we never really knew, at least officially, we didn't know when Winston Wright came back, but he was going to be my surprise player of the year last year had he gotten back on the field. And as excited as I am to see what Bell and Morlock bring to the offense, I really think that as explosive and productive as he was at West Virginia, with surrounded by less talent than he'll be surrounded by this year. I cannot wait to see what Winston Wright brings to the offense. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how Mike utilizes all this talent because really, look at who defensive coordinators are going to start with. Jordan Travis, then go to Trey Benson, then go to Johnny Wilson. And now you're adding Winston Wright and Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock, and Marquise Douglas is a guy that continues to develop. He looks leaner and quicker than he ever has based on what we saw yesterday. I don't know. Listen, I think this offense is going to create a lot of nightmares for defensive coordinators next year.
100%, and it starts with the QB. But that's the good thing. I don't think we're totally tied to. Obviously, he's the guy that ties it all together. But God forbid if something were to happen where he got hurt, there's enough talent on this offense where these other guys could, we could still be productive and score points. Maybe not in the flashy, maybe not having everything, but there's enough talent to where I don't know. I don't quit talking about it because I don't even want to speak it in meetings.
So, hey, speak it to existence, Mark. No.
I'm done.
There's no bad karma here. You're speaking it to existence. Listen, I do want to ask both of you this. When Mike took over in 2020, took over a pretty bad football team, to be very honest. It was the culture of the program was a mess. There was a lack of talent across the board. Our good friend Brad Loing, Mark, always has told me one time I'd ask him why he had gone from South Carolina to Florida, and then obviously to Florida State from Florida. But he used to tell me if you can't turn around a football team in Florida in 3 years, you probably can't turn it around. Mike Norvell is entering his fourth year, coming off a 10-3 season in year 3. Do you think he's ahead of schedule, or do you think he's on schedule with bringing this program back to where, FSU fans are used to seeing it?
Well, when he took it over, it was a hopeless situation. It really was. Right? When he first came here, then you threw COVID into it, and I kind of give that year a pass for him. So, based on the expectations that we had last year, we thought last year was definitely ahead of schedule, and with the expectation that's heaped on this team going into this year, you got to say ahead of schedule, honestly. And thanks to the transfer portal for a lot of that too, because that's where our most productive players probably come from.
Fish,
what about you? Ahead of schedule?
Yeah, I think last year put them ahead of schedule. They struggled the first 2 years. It was a rough first 2 years, and for whatever reasons, they lost some games that they shouldn't have lost. But it was a tough first 2 seasons. But yeah, I definitely think they're ahead of schedule right now. But you got to follow it up with another good season. You don't want to drop back to 9-3 or 8-4 this year. And all it takes is the games. They're going to have a target on their back this year. Everybody they play knows that Florida State is one of the contenders in that conference. You're going to get their best shot each week. You can't have that one down game against a team that's lesser talented than you. You've seen it happen before where, Florida State in the past, they've played a team maybe on the road that they're just better than. They overcame that last year, but you don't want that to happen when you're trying to put together a great season. One of those games where you just come out flat, things don't go your way, but they're definitely heading in the right direction. They got to take that next step. Right now, they're in a good spot to take that next step with this team, with as experienced they are and where they are as far as they're ahead of most of the ACC teams. So they're in a good spot to meet those expectations this year.
Yeah, and I agree. Listen, I think he's ahead of schedule. And Mark, you brought up a valid point. I'm not sure you can even count the COVID year. They didn't go through a spring practice. They didn't go through a traditional offseason. And that, what I call the bastard year, is hard anyway, right? You don't really sign your entire class that you want. You keeping some committed kids from the previous staff, those kind of things. But yes, I definitely think when you factor in that COVID year, they're really ahead of schedule. And as excited as we were about going into last season, I think that if you're a Florida State fan, there's a tremendous amount of reason to be excited about this year. And listen, as you said, Fish, their expectations, the standard is now 10 wins. And listen, at face value, the schedule looks like it could be, but very favorable to FSU. But the portal changes that. We'll see who these teams add and lose that are on a Florida State schedule. But certainly a lot to be excited about, guys. Spring practice is one of my favorite. I just like going and watching practice. Spring, you get to see a lot of football. So I'm looking forward to sitting down and at the end of spring and seeing how much better we feel about some of these position battles, some of these positions as a whole. And Mark, looking forward to getting you down here this spring and getting you to see the team in person and getting your thoughts on this. Fish, obviously, we hope to see you up here too. But guys, I appreciate your time as always. These conversations, particularly this one, was going to be fascinating because of all the potential position battles and who could end up where. If you're a listener or viewer to this podcast/videocast, and not a subscriber to the Osceola or to floridastate.rivals.com or the Osceola, please go to floridastate.rivals.com or the Osceola.com. We do have some content that's free. We got some recruiting updates. Fish just put his Fish Bits up on the premium recruiting board. He's got all kinds of information there. And, of course, we will be back each week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with Seminole Sidelines. And, obviously, it will be football-centric as Florida State moves into spring practice starting next Monday. Recruiting is going to be at an all-time high again because players can come on campus starting this weekend, and Florida State will have visitors on campus just about every day and every weekend. So a lot going on. Additionally, we got the baseball coverage, softball coverage, basketball coverage. Exciting time. A lot of sports going on at one time. But listen, I'm fired up for spring football. I know you guys are too. But we look forward to keeping you informed and up to date on what's going on in the practice fields. And we will be back again next week with another edition of Seminole Sidelines. Thanks for joining us.